Good morning. In today's video, we will do page number 2 and 3 of class 10 supplementary reader in English, Foot Without Feet. So today we will start from page number 2. We'll start with page number 2. And the chapter that we are going to continue is A Triumph of Surgery. So let's start. I tried to sound severe. Now I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right down and give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands. Oh, I will, Mr. Harriet. I am sure you are right. But it is so difficult, so very difficult. She set off, head down, along the road as if determined to put the new regime into practice immediately. I watched their progress with growing concern. So now here regime means a system or ordered way of doing things. So severe here refers to very great or intense. So now in this, what is given here is, in this it is given, the narrator, that is Dr. Harriet, he tried to talk to Mrs. Pumphrey, that is, if she did not control Tricky's eating habits and increased his exercise, he would fall ill. And then he also told Mrs. So he told that she should somehow be strong and she should be very strict with the dog and she should put the dog on diet. And if she fails to do that, then the dog will fall ill. So Mrs. Pumphrey, what she did was, she accepted that she knew that Mr. Harriet was right. But the dog, she was very much attracted towards the dog, that it was very difficult to refuse anything to to dog. So Mrs. Pumphrey, what she did was, she said that she does not have that much courage that she could refuse to the dog. So then what she did was, she left that place as if she was now ready to follow that new routine properly. So Mr. Harriet, what he did was, he was watching them go and he was looking at Tricky and he was very much worried after looking at Tricky. And the way Tricky was walking, it was very serious, he was just thinking that it is that he might fall ill if he continues, if Tricky is given the same diet and he follows the same way of living every day. I watched their progress with growing concern. Tricky was tottering along in his little tweed coat. Tottering means move in a very unsteady way, move in a very feeble way. Tweed coat means a rough surface woolen cloth. So now in this it's given, I watched their progress with growing concern. Tricky was tottering along in his little tweed coat. He had a whole wardrobe of these coats for the cold weather and a raincoat for the wet days. He struggled on drooping in his harness. Harness is like a set of straps and fittings. So I thought it wouldn't be long before I heard from Mrs. Pumphrey. So now in this, what is given here is, in this it is given that Mr. Harriet, he was when he was watching both of them go. So that time he looked at Tricky and Tricky was walking unsteadily. So the narrator was also looking at the tweed coat that Tricky was wearing, and he said that he had a lot of coats also, and he also had raincoat for the rainy days. So this shows that this lady, she was a very rich lady. Mrs. Pumphrey was a rich lady, and she did spend a lot on her dog. But the narrator, he knew that he would soon be finding that there will be some problem with Tricky, and like he is overfed, he is not given a proper diet, so he might be facing some problem in the coming days. The expected call came within a few weeks. Mrs. Pumphrey was distraught. Tricky would not eat, and Tricky would eat nothing. Distraught is very worried and upset. So Tricky would not eat. Tricky would eat nothing, refused even his favorite dishes, and beside, he had bouts of vomiting. He spent all his time lying on the rug, panting. Panting is breathing with short, quick breaths. That is out of breath. Didn't want to go for walks. Didn't want to do anything. I had made my plans in advance. The only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period. I suggested that he be hospitalized for about a fortnight to be kept under observation. So now in this, what is given here is, in this it is given that narrator, he knew that he would be receiving a call from Mrs. Pumphrey about Tricky, and as he was expecting the call, the same did happen. He did receive a call from Mrs. Pumphrey about Tricky falling ill. So like it was within a few days that he did receive this call, and when Mrs. Pumphrey called Tricky, so that called the doctor. So that time she was quite upset because Tricky was refusing to eat even his favorite dishes also, and he was vomiting quite frequently also, and he was lazy. He was lying throughout the day. He did not want to do anything. So now what he did was, like, he was a veterinary doctor, and he knew that the only way to set a new regime, to put him on a new regime, to set a new routine for him, the best way would be to take Tricky out of the house for a few days. So what he did was, he suggested to Mrs. Pumphrey that it would be good if Tricky is hospitalized and he is kept under observation for fortnight. Fortnight is 15 days. And then after this, what happens is, the poor lady almost swooned. She was sure that he would pine and die if he did not see her every day. But I took a firm line. Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him. In fact, I thought it best to take him without delay, and followed by Mrs. Pumphrey's wailing, I marched out of the car carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket. So now in this, swooned means a partial or total loss of consciousness. Wailings here refer to anger, crying with pain, grief, or anger. And here marched means to walk quickly and with determination. So now in this, what is given here is, the narrator, what he did was, like, he wanted Tricky to be all right. So the best thing he could do was to hospitalize him for 15 days. So on hearing this, Mrs. Pumphrey, she fainted, and she was sure that Tricky would not be able to live without her. But the narrator, he was very firm in his decision, and he really wanted to help Tricky. So he thought that this was the best time to take him out of the house and control his eating habit. So he told her that this was the only option, as Tricky was ill. So without any delay, he has to take him to the hospital, and Tricky has to be hospitalized. So he went to their house, and Mrs. Pumphrey, she was crying, because she did not want Tricky to go away from her. So what he did was he took Tricky, he wrapped him in a blanket and put him in the car. The entire staff was roused, and maids rushed in and out bringing his day bed, his night bed, favorite cushions, toy and rubber rings, breakfast bowls, lunch bowls, supper bowls. Supper is dinner. Realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff, I started to drive away. As I moved off, Mrs. Pumphrey was with a despairing cry threw an armful of the little coats through the window. I looked into the mirror before I turned the corner of the drive. Everybody was in tears. Out on the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping on the seat by my side. I patted the head, and Tricky made a brave effort to wag his tail. Poor old lad, I said. You haven't a kick in you, but I think I know a cure for you. So now in this, what is given here is when he went to the house, he brought the dog out wrapped in a blanket and he put the dog in the car. So that time the entire staff was busy. The maids were rushing in and out and bringing the things. They were bringing his morning bed, the night bed, the cushion, toys, breakfast bowls, supper bowls. And he realized that time that his car would not be able to hold so much. So what he did was he moved, and that was the time Mrs. Pumphrey, she threw a lot of coats on Tricky, a lot of coats of Tricky that he used to wear. So what she did was she threw all these coats in the car, and as he was turning the car, so that time he could see in the rear mirror that everyone was crying. So what he did was the animal was sitting next to him. He patted the animal, and the animal wagged his tail. So the narrator thought that time, and he told Tricky that he knew that Tricky did not have energy, but he will surely make him better, and he had a way to get him better.